The wealthy think about money differently, and Fundamentals of Level 3 Leadership shows you exactly how. Stay until the end. We will focus on what it says about people and power. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Chapter 1: Leadership and Strategy. Basics. This section introduces some basic concepts that apply throughout the other sections of the Level 3 Leadership Framework. Consider these the basic building blocks upon which we will build going forward. Leading strategic change concept. People want to talk about leadership, but before long they, or we, have to ask, leadership to what end? Where are we going? And that's the strategy question. I asked a CEO once what his strategy was, and his answer was, "Our strategy for the next 6 months is cut costs." I waited, but he was done. It didn't seem strategic, certainly not long-term, and surely omitted many areas of important concern. So, to talk about leadership requires one to talk about strategy, or its component, vision. Who decides where we are going and what we should emphasize? Without clarity about direction or endpoint, how do we know how to lead? So, I say, you cannot talk about leadership without talking about strategy. What about leaders who are implementing someone else's strategy? These people are managers unless they have a bigger view of what's going on and how they can inspire their people to work to that end. If you ask to what end, the implication is we are going from here to there. Strategy demands an answer to the there question, so strategic thinking is a key leadership skill set. Further, going from here to there implies the change question, how are we going to get there? So really, when we talk about leadership, necessarily we are talking about 3 things: direction or endpoint, leadership, and managing change, or more briefly, leading strategic change. One very successful CEO of a $30 billion business once told me, "I'm a change master. You ask me to maintain an organization in its current state, I can't play there. I always think there's a better way." I was impressed with his comment. We call the people who maintain things the way they are bureaucrats. They certainly aren't leading strategic change. In this view, would-be leaders need to know and manifest a lot about leadership and also strategy formulation, and they also need to be change masters. While this is a book on leadership, you will find elements of all 3 in this volume. Visual Capitalist, on the 30th of November, 18, displayed a chart of what CEOs do. In sum, they reported that chief executive officers spent about 25% of their time on people and relationships, 25% on business unit reviews, and 21% on strategy. Those data give us a good overview of what 3/4 of an executive's day, week, a year looks like: people, unit performance reviews, what do you measure, and strategy. Leading strategic change. Example: Hans von Luck was the German panzer commander assigned to defend the critical bridges over the Orne River during D-Day, June 6, 1944. Later in his career, he was assigned to defend against the Russian tide on the Eastern Front. Without reinforcements, out of ammunition, and surrounded by the Russian army, von Luck assembled his troops and made this statement: "We are here now, and I think it is more or less the end of the world. Please forget all about the 1,000-year Reich. Please forget all about that." You will ask, why then are we going to fight again? I tell you, there is only one reason you are fighting: it is for your families, your grounds, your homeland. Always think about what will happen when the Russians overcome your wives, your little daughters, your village, our homeland. Pegasus Bridge, Stephen E. Ambrose, page 2255. Von Luck had a bigger picture fed by his conversations with Rommel, earlier, in which Rommel declared in Africa, the war is lost. Von Luck was not buried in the details, in the bogs, in the reeds. He could transcend his immediate situation and see the broader picture and articulate a vision that would more than motivate, rather inspire his troops. Diagram Challenge 1. In whatever leadership role you have or aspire to, think about what that part of the organization is trying to accomplish. What is the purpose of that organization? Where do you imagine it to be in 10 years? What would be your strategy for getting there? Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how well you understand and can lead a change effort. Create a time chart of how you spend your weekly time, 164 hours, on average, especially with regard to time spent leading, strategizing, and managing change. 10 hours 1 minute remaining. 2. Levels of human behavior concept. This is a very important chapter. To begin, may I ask you a short series of important questions? First, how old are you? Underscore, 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 underscore. Thank you. If this were a personal conversation, we could start with a bit of accurate sharing. Yes, no? I am 73 as of this writing, born in 1947. Now, in your X years of experience, given all the people you have met in your life, what proportion of people's visible behavior, what you can capture on film, would you estimate to be habitual? By habitual, I mean unthinkingly repetitive. People express or show their habits when they repeat behavior over again. Frequently, habits are so ingrained that they too become semi- or pre-conscious. What is your personal estimate? How much of people's visible behavior is habitual? Chapter 2. Write your answer here, underscore, 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 underscore %. Now, in your experience, given all the people you have met in your life, what proportion of the way people think would you estimate to be habitual? We can't see what people are thinking only as they reveal it to us in their visible behavior. Yet, after a while, can you begin to predict what someone will say? What is your estimate? How much of the way people think is mindlessly repetitive? Underscore, 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 underscore %. Finally, consider what I will call level 3 our semi-conscious, pre-conscious values, assumptions, beliefs, and expectations about the way the world is or should be. We can call these VABEs, rhymes with babes, for short. We say these are semi- or pre-conscious because we are often not really thinking about them, yet they emerge in our judgments, conclusions, thoughts, and behaviors. In your experience, given all the people you have met thus far in life, what proportion of people's VABEs are habitual, mindlessly repetitive? Chapter 3. Write your estimate here, underscore, 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 underscore %. So, we can think of human behavior as occurring at 3 levels. Level 1 is visible behavior, the things that people say and do that we can capture on film. Level 1 behavior is available to us everywhere we turn if we observe. Level 2 is conscious thought. Clearly, we all have conscious thoughts. We are aware of our thoughts. Further, we choose whether or not we will reveal our thoughts to others. Sometimes our thoughts and emotions leak to others when we sigh, frown, smile, or roll our eyes. Sometimes we choose to say what we are thinking, and this becomes the basis for honest communication. Level 2 also includes our conclusions, that is, our judgments about what is happening around us, about what others say and do, and about events in the environment. Level 3 is our VABEs. VABEs are similar to the concept of memes introduced by Richard Dawkins in the UK. He called them units of cultural transmission, that is, how people, mostly children, learn what is right and wrong in a culture. Genes are tangible packets of information passed around societies and from generation. Memes, by contrast, are intangible packets of information passed around society and down generation after generation. John Brody called memes viruses of the mind and asserted three types: identity, value, and instrumental. Identity memes name something or someone. Virginia and Europe are identity memes. Identity memes can also label an ethereal concept like a stirrup, chair, or the wheel. Value memes assign a moral value to a concept. Stealing is bad is a value meme. So is cleanliness is next to godliness. Value memes relate to what is good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral. Instrumental memes are if-then statements that label a cause and effect link. Hard work brings success is a strategy meme. So is if you eat properly, you will lose weight. The emotional component of memes is clearer in the concept of VABEs. The things we value by definition are what we prefer versus what we don't prefer. Honest conversation might be valued by one person and not by another. Our assumptions include those linkages or labels that we have come to accept without questioning. Young people should be seen and not heard would be one such assumption. Beliefs are closely linked to values and assumptions. God loves me is an example of a belief. Expectations are equally as powerful as values, assumptions, and beliefs. People have learned over the course of their lives to expect certain things. Polite people shake hands, or polite people bow, or polite people don't touch you with their left hand are examples of expectations. We can think of values, assumptions, beliefs, and expectations as different windows into the same core concept. VABEs are semi, or preconscious because they are so familiar to us. They are like water to a goldfish. We don't think about them so much unless we encounter a VABAbrasion, that is, when something happens that annoys, angers, or irritates us. Typically, our emotions are reactions to almost instantaneous comparisons between what the world is presenting to us and what our VABEs are. What we value, assume, believe, or expect is in a broad sense what we want. What the world presents to us, what is happening around us, is what we get. So moment by moment, we are constantly comparing what we have got with what we want, and if they match up, things are good. If they don't match up, we will likely experience a VABAbrasion and irritation or conflict with our VABEs. Recent research into brain functioning has clarified the huge impact our preconscious VABEs have on our decision-making. See Daniel Kahneman Thinking Fast and Slow, Joshua Green Moral Tribes, and Jonathan Haidt The Righteous Mind. Humans tend to make very fast judgments about even large and important situations. The field of evolutionary psychology explains why this might have been a Darwinian advantage. If we are taught, for example, to be cautious of strangers with weapons, that VABE can save one's life. So when we observe and deal with others, we can choose to, or not, pay attention to all three levels of human behavior. Clearly, we can only see what is happening at levels 2 and 3 by what we observe at level 1. Think of level 1 behavior as the tip of the iceberg and the surface of the water, the boundary between level 1 and level 2. You can see what is above the waterline and what is at the waterline, but very little of what is below. Sometimes, but not always, people will tell us what their thoughts and VABEs are. Those who do tell us may be authentically accurate, deceitful, or lacking in self-awareness. Frequently we have to infer what people are thinking or assuming by signals they send at level 1. Frowns, sighs, rolling of the eyes, shouting, laughter, facial expressions in general, use of words like should, have to, good, and bad, noises in general, grunts, growls, all give us some insight into what people are thinking and feeling. When people get angry or conflicted or emotional, they are often reacting to a verb abrasion, and we may try to assess what the verb might be that caused that irritation or anger. While the research to answer these questions would be difficult to conduct, I have asked these questions to managers all over the world. On average, they will say 75%, 85%, and 95% plus respectively. Do those numbers match your experience? If we look at Northern Ireland, the Balkans, Central African tribal conflicts, India and Pakistan, US race relations, China and Tibet. Pick your part of the globe, the lingering, residual, omnipresent influence of VABEs is evident. If those numbers are anywhere near reality, think of the implications. What are the odds in any situation that a person will learn something behaviorally, cognitively, or emotionally that will change their habits, their lives? The answer would be somewhere between 25 and 0%. In the vast minority. Which of course begs a major question: are you open to learning, that is, to changing some of your level 1, level 2, and level 3 habits? William James once noted that genius is the art of non-habitual thought. Example: one person curses when someone else cuts in front of them in traffic. Another person slows down and smiles. What is the difference? One person on his way into work is thinking, "What do I have to do today?" While another is thinking, "What am I going to create today?" What is the difference? One person opens a present and sighs and frowns. Another opens a present and is elated. What is the difference? One person always looks for what is missing while another admires what has been done. What is the difference? Diagram source: https://Getty Images. Detail the photo: tip of the iceberg, royalty-free image 157509282. Add pop-up equals true challenge 1. Observe carefully what others say and do. What VABEs are they expressing? Try to identify another person's VABEs and write them down. Then, ask that person if they are accurate. Listen for the shoulds, have to's, and judgments of other people. Try to write down the underlying verb. Don't just do that in your head. Write it down. There is a big difference between thinking you know something and articulating it or writing it down. Find the words to accurately describe the VABEs of which you are vaguely aware. Write down a list of your top 20 most important VABEs. Then show that list to someone who knows you well and see if they agree based on your level 1 behavior. Develop a sensitive verb radar. Be aware of the signals when other people let you see a glimpse of their underlying VABEs. Leadership point of view concept: we introduced above the concept of human habituality. People manifest over time their habitual points of view, that is, how they look at the world. People may or may not be aware of their points of view. We introduce here 3 common habitual points of view for your consideration. Many people take what we could call a follower's point of view, or FPV. We infer this from the things that people say and do, that is, by observing their level 1 behavior. People with an FPV tend to say things like, "What do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? When do you need it done by?" And so forth. They expect the E in VABEs, others to guide them, to tell them, to instruct them. Other people take a bureaucratic point of view, or BPV. Again, we can observe this because people will repeatedly say things like, "That's not my job. That's not how we do things around here. That's not in the operating manual. That's not acceptable practice." Or, "Have you filled out the form yet? Some people have developed a leadership point of view, or LPV. They manifest three characteristics at level 1. They see what needs to be done, they understand all the forces at play, and they have the courage to ACT. Have you ever noticed people who in conversation seem to have a knack for cutting to the heart of an issue while others are milling around in the peripheral weeds? They see what the real issue is. One popular example would be Steve Jobs' insight when he returned to Apple to become its new CEO. Reviewing the company's line of computer products, he saw that the proliferation of models had dissipated the company's development efforts. He refocused efforts by recognizing the need to consolidate and focus the company's efforts and product lines. People with the LPV understand all the forces at play in an organization, not just their favorite ones. Many general managers still hold an emphasis on the discipline of their past, whether it be finance, marketing, or operations. An effective general manager with the LPV is less likely to be blindsided than a manager who remains focused on their original discipline, finance, accounting, marketing, because he or she understands how all the elements are essential to organizational health. A senior-level manager in a $20 billion defense company once noted that people were surprised that his boss, who came out of a finance background, did not drive meetings from a financial point of view. Rather, he put emphasis where it was needed when it was needed, serving customers, fixing operational bottlenecks, ramping up marketing, or solidifying the company's equity structure. Finally, I mention the courage to act. I say courage because it takes courage to make decisions and then live with their consequences. In my own experience as the CEO of a non-profit organization of 3,000 people, I learned that while many people will be quick to offer advice, in the end, someone must make a decision, and if that person is the senior officer, he or she likely has developed an LPV. That is not to say that followers and bureaucrats don't make it to senior ranks, they do. I've observed CEOs who were followers and relied on consulting reports and subordinate action to administer. Likewise, I have seen CEOs who were bureaucrats so that their decisions were locked into the way things had been done historically, to the detriment of their firms. Some will say that I'll develop an LPV when I get the job that requires it. This is a mistake in my view. My own research into the relationship between vision and organizational level showed no correlation. People with vision had it early in their careers and kept it throughout. Likewise, some people without vision made it to the higher ranks. This suggests that one can and should develop the three skill clusters of the LPV early in a career. If you don't, when the conversations turn to what should we do, the FPVs and the BPVs will likely be listeners in the conversation, they will have nothing to say. If you wanted to check your balance among these three skill sets, you might take the simple self-assessment tool at this location, http://Virginia. Qualtrics. Complexi? SID equals SV_DNXIC Duck 6 QPBVL. Example 1. CEO declares his dedication to staying the course and continuing the policies and strategies of his predecessors. Another hires multiple consultants to give her advice on what to do. Another thinks for a while and declares a vision for where he wants the company to be in 10 years. What is the difference? Diagrams. What is your habitual point of view? Point of view, POV, things they say. Follower POV, what do you want me to do? By when? How do you want me to do it? What is my authority? And so on. Bureaucratic POV, that is not my job. That is not our way. Let me refer you. Have you filled out the form yet? Challenge 1. Pay attention to your words as you react to assignments and opportunities. Does your L1 language suggest an FPV, a BPV, or an LPV? Listen to the language of your leaders and managers. Which POV is suggested by their language? Observe your colleagues. Which ones have an FPV? Which ones have a BPV? Which ones have an LPV? Reflect on your scores to the self-assessment tool above. Do they suggest an FPV, a BPV, or an LPV? Other than the phrases offered above, what other indicators of FPV or BPV or LPV can you imagine? Seeing what needs to be done concept. The first element in the leadership point of view is to see what needs to be done. Managers and bureaucrats wait for someone else to clarify what is important and what we should do about it. Leaders have the ability to cut through a fog of extraneous data and analysis and home in on the core issues. Some people seem to have this ability innately, but I suppose that virtually everyone has had to learn this skill. Clearly, toddlers cannot see the bigger picture and don't have the ability to cut to the chase. The number of priorities that most organizations can deal with is limited. Leaders who see 10 things to work on will likely dissipate their energies and those of their people to the point that nothing gets done particularly well. Focus is important. Lou Gerstner, former CEO of IBM, in his book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, noted that lack of focus is the most common cause of corporate mediocrity. The ability to find the 2 to 3 key issues is a critical leadership skill. Some people outsource sight to consulting companies. They ask others to analyze their businesses and tell them what needs to be done. One big danger here, beside the cost of this approach, is that many consulting reports end up gathering dust on corporate credences because the executives either don't believe them or don't have the courage to implement them. Sight is not easy to quantify. What is obvious to one is not to another. Good leadership sight is a function of a lifetime of learning and experience gathering. One may begin to see patterns in analysis, even consultants' analyses, in broader trends, and in one's world view. Sometimes, the right questions can bring sight. Who are our biggest competitive threats? What technology could disrupt our plans? What is keeping us from delivering on our customer value promises? What is the linkage between our people, our core capabilities, and satisfying our customers? What are the links in our value chain and how can we manage them better? Executives who have sight can see the way the organization works and how it delivers value to customers. They must be able to see and describe the transformation of intangible assets like human capital, social capital, and organizational capital through corporate capabilities to customer satisfaction that results in tangible assets that appear on income statements. Any executive who cannot trace those linkages is flying blind. Example: when Steve Jobs was hired back to Apple, he was confronted with a long list of problems and issues. The company had admittedly lost its way. The number of products had proliferated, diffusing organizational energy. Jobs recognized this and in a meeting drew a simple 2x2 diagram with corporate and retail on one axis and laptop and desktop on the other. Then, he said, that the company would offer only one product in each cell and instantaneously focus the corporation's considerable strength. Since then, Apple's products and business ventures have expanded, but at the time, Jobs' ability to see the confusion that a broad array of development projects was creating and his ability to focus the company's efforts were instrumental in Apple's resurgence. Chapter 4: Laptop. MacBook Pro. MacBook. At Coca-Cola, Bob Goizueta was confronted with a management team that was lamenting the company's success. The company had been so successful, they said, worldwide that they had succeeded themselves out of ways to grow. They thought the market was saturated. And for a brand recognized in more than 200 countries, it looked on the surface that they had a good argument. Goizueta responded with 2 simple questions. What is the average liquid intake of human beings worldwide? And what is the average intake worldwide of our products? No one knew the answers, so they went off and did a little research. The answers came back 64 fluid ounces and 4 fluid ounces. It was clear to all that the company had enormous opportunity to raise that proportion by targeting the 60 fluid ounces, on average, that people were drinking that weren't Coca-Cola products, for divided by 64 is equal to 6%, leaving a 94% market penetration opportunity. Now, let us not suppose that everyone wants their babies drinking sweet soft drinks, so this analysis also urged company executives to find other products with which they could refresh the world. Diagram source, https://google.com search. Q equals John plus Ruskin plus images and RLZ equals 1C1GCEB underscore ENUS 910 US 910 and SXSRF equals ALAKK01UV3 auxiliary underscore HCSZA7 NUEKGL underscore Z underscore AWs. 1611766150061 and TBM equals ISCHAN source equals IU and ICTX equals 1 and FIR equals ENIC NGGHTBDG8 XM% 252 CXKMWD8 FGN5 TM% 252 C underscore and VET equals 1 and USC equals RF4 underscore KRGNX6CZ1 underscore GLEV812S9FQOQF97WFW and SA equals X and VED equals 2RUKU9DBMY LZURXEM1KFHETBC8GQ9QF6BAGNEAE and BU equals 1366 and B equals 578 hash IMGURK equals ENIC NGGHTBDG. 8XM Challenge. Practice developing your insight by 1. Putting every problem in a broader context and relating it to the whole. Clarifying inefficiencies of energy. Where is energy being wasted in our organization? Constantly asking, what is a faster, more efficient, more effective way? Asking, what single thing would give us the most leverage? Asking, what technology could replace us or ours? Asking, what is our customer's perception of us? Asking, how can I bring instant focus to this situation? Understanding all the forces at play concept. The second element of the leadership point of view, LPV, is understanding all the forces at play. Many who are promoted out of a functional leadership responsibility continue to see the world primarily from their comfortable mental platform, their historical experience. Executives who come from operations are likely to be most concerned about efficiencies, productivity, fixed assets, and supply chains. Executives who come out of finance are likely to focus mostly on balance sheets, equity, operating ratios, stock price, and the economy. This will be exacerbated to the extent their contracts emphasize stock price, stockholders' interests. Executives who came out of marketing are more likely to focus on brand image, marketing campaigns, raising the top line, revenues, and advertising. Focusing on revenue generation is not necessarily wrong, it's just that more revenues without profits aren't worth much. Focusing on productivity isn't wrong, unless it is at the expense of generating more revenues. I know of companies who have managed their productivity into bankruptcy. All of this is natural. People tend to be creatures of habit. People are more comfortable talking about and dealing with issues they have dealt with before. But becoming a general manager, an executive, demands a balanced perspective and attention on all of the key forces at play. Executives who rely too heavily on their experience are likely to be blindsided by issues and problems that lie outside their historical expertise. Obviously, one way to overcome this tendency is to recruit experts in the areas that one is not strong in to be a part of the management team. Some people are better at this than others. Some are too proud to admit that they might not know what's going on or have an intimate feel for what's happening in the functional areas outside their past expertise. This is one reason I am a strong advocate of the MBA degree for any manager and for any professor of business. Understanding the key issues and dilemmas of all the 10 or more functional fields in a business, finance, operations, accounting, marketing, strategy, human resources, leadership, ethics, economics, decision analysis, communications, is essential, in my mind and experience, to understanding how they all work together in an enterprise. Managers and teachers who rely too heavily on their functional field at the expense of an understanding of how they integrate do themselves and their organizations a disservice. Imagine you were a doctor in a hospital emergency room, ER. Without warning, a gurney is pushed into your service bay. There is a human lying on the gurney. You have no background information, no medical history, nothing other than the person lying in front of you. What do you look for? Readers are not likely medical doctors, nevertheless, you have a mental theory about what doctors look for. Write that down here. What is your semi-conscious ER triage model? Note, we ask you your view before we share ours in several chapters. We are inviting you to do your best thinking before you read about ours. It's too easy to not do that and then say, "Oh, I knew that." It turns out that there are 13 systems that together create a fully functioning human being. Not all of these are critical for immediate survival, but many of them are. ER doctors will look for several things immediately. 1. Is it conscious and communicative? Can it talk to me? Is it breathing? Is it leaking blood? Any wounds? Is the brain functioning? Iron nerve responsiveness? Is the heart functioning? Pulse and blood pressure? Are the kidneys producing water? Is the nervous system responsive? Lesser systems like urinary tract function, glandular function, sexual function, and so on are important and can be considered after the critical ones have been attended to and confirmed. What is your ER triage template for a company? That is, if you were assigned to be the new CEO of a company without any prior knowledge, what would be your priors about how to assess the health of that organization? Write that down here. Having asked this question of managers all over the world, it's clear to me that active managers with significant responsibilities have widely varying implicit models. When asked to put those models on paper, the discrepancies between people's models becomes obvious. Even just sharing with one neighbor, most managers find things they had overlooked and they modify their models. As a budding executive, you have an implicit model in your head. You wrote it down in the box above. Did it include the following? Financial status, profitability, balance sheet stability, income statement health. Customer value proposition, what do we promise? How well do we deliver on those promises? Corporate capabilities, do we have the key capabilities needed to deliver on those customer promises? Raw materials? Transformation processes? Channel management? Public awareness and brand management? Human capital, what is the imaginary sum of what your people can do? A stack of resumes is a poor estimate of this pool. Social capital, how well do your people work together? How much are they ensconced in functional, location, or program walls and fiefdoms? Organizational capital, are you organized to unleash your human capital potential or to dampen it? Is your IT system up to date and enabling or obsolete and hindering? How much bureaucracy do your people have to fight through to get things done? Executive team, do you have a high-powered team who can all explain and are enthusiastic about your organizational charter? Do their talents and skills balance each other? Leadership, who can see all of these things and explain how they fit together? Who can describe without notes your mission, vision, values, strategy, and short-term operating goals? Did your list include all of these essential business health factors? Did you add anything else not subsumed by these categories? Example: Walt Disney and his older brother, Roy, were a formidable force in the entertainment industry. Walt had the vision and values clearly in mind and could provide creative direction. Roy was more business-oriented and practically focused. A former banker, he helped Walt channel his creative juices into a financially solid and sustainable corporation that has become a giant in the entertainment world. Soichiro Honda and Takeo Fujisawa had a similar relationship as the Disney brothers, but one that expressed itself in the Japanese and global automobile industries. Honda was, like Walt, the creative force behind Honda, properly pronounced Honda, not Honda, directing its engineering and product development functions. Fujisawa managed the financial side of the business, one that grew into a global conglomerate with products in automobiles, lawn care, motorcycles, and other segments. Fujisawa was known for his motto, "Always tell the customer the truth," a vibe that many executives today do not behave. Diagram Challenge 1. Start now to expand your understanding of the various forces in a business. Don't wait until you hope to get promoted, do it now so you are prepared and seen to be prepared. Clarify your Take Charge map. Make sure it's complete, test it with others. Use your Take Charge map with every new assignment. Analyze all the factors in play and get into the habit of assessing them all in every job, even if you are assigned a narrow functional job. Refine your map with every experience. Identify people who understand the various elements of your Take Charge map better than you do. Cultivate their wisdom by asking them questions and for explanations of their answers. Press yourself to understand so that you can explain easily the linkages between and among all of the elements in your Take Charge map. Your ability to see how one function system affects the whole will be critical to your ability to manage a whole enterprise. Don't fake it. When you don't know, say so, then go find out, then add that insight to your box of wisdom. Remember, age is no guarantee of wisdom or judgment. Only those who learn from their happenings in life are adding to their reservoir of wisdom. The courage to act concept. The third step in the leadership point of view is the courage to act. There are many people who can see what needs to be done. Most of them we call journalists. They are out there every day writing about all the problems they see and believe need attention. And there are many people out there who are studying all the forces at play. We call most of them professors. They are researching all kinds of issues and problems and reporting on their findings in a vast number of journals and books. But people who have the courage to act are not so common, and the reason is the fear of rejection. Humans have had really only one major form of punishment throughout our history: exclusion. When people misbehave, we generally remove them from our society. We send our kids to their rooms. We send thieves to jail. We excommunicate people who don't follow the church's rules. We ignore those not in our clique. We meet in secret. Over the millennia, humans have learned to conform or be excluded. We banded together to survive and thrive. And every group had rules. Every group today has rules. Things you can do and things you cannot do and still maintain your membership in the group. So we all have learned to do what is expected of us or risk being put out of the group. We will address this more in the chapter on living inside out versus outside in. For now, though, realize that many if not most managers are afraid. They are afraid of censure and doing something that will offend the group. Some, a few, are so unconcerned about the judgment of others that they behave so unusually or outrageously as to not attract many followers. The effective executive has cultivated an inner boldness in which he or she can stretch the boundaries of what has been expected and accepted in the past while still maintaining enough traditional behavior as to not offend the majority of followers. That said, no one can predict the exact outcomes of their attempts to lead. Leaders must believe in what they do. In fact, deep down, they all believe in what they do or they wouldn't do it. And we never know for sure that what we do will work out, will win the day, or lead the organization to success. This is a great and powerful dilemma for executives. If you don't act, you will be seen as a past-promoting bureaucrat. If you act and fail, you will be seen as a bad leader. Effective leaders have the courage to overcome the fear of rejection, what some call the fear of failure, and act. They are not paralyzed by their analyses of all the forces at play, rather they're galvanized by them. Analyses give them greater confidence in their decisions. Of course, deciding and implementing are two different things. But the decision to act must come first. Skill and wisdom in the how-s of implementation are also important, a topic for another chapter. Pause and think about how much you fear the judgments of others. And which others? Is your fear high, medium, or low? I doubt that it is non-existent. Some concern for the acceptance of others is essential to all good leaders. And in the end, effective leaders recognize that they must overcome whatever trepidation they may have about the uncertainty of the future and act. They do everything they can to gather the information they need to make reasonable judgments, they consider all of the options, and at last, they must exercise courage and do something. Finally, note that bluster, impulsiveness, and foolhardiness are not the same as courage. Fools may indeed rush in where wise men fear to tread. Wise men will have done their homework, prepared, analyzed, utilized all their skills, and the skills of their advisors, and then with the odds stacked in their favor, proceed with confidence in the face of possible failure. Example: Vijay Singh, the professional golfer, once said that confidence doesn't come from winning, rather confidence comes from hard work and winning comes from confidence. His point is a powerful one. To have courage, one must have done one's homework and believe that homework, whether it's mental or physical, has prepared them to perform. If you are untrained in martial arts and walking down the street, you may be, rightfully, fearful. If you have trained for years and are confident in your skills, you can walk down the street with some confidence. This confidence radiates from your being, people can sense it. Diagram challenge: courage is difficult to assess in the absence of a history of decisions. And it is something one can develop. Perhaps these exercises will help. Consider how much of your life you live in fear of rejection. How much does how you dress, speak, and act reflect your own desires or the expectations of others? Consider how much of your self-esteem depends on the judgments of others. How much do you define your value and worth by the feedback you get from others? If you care too much, you will be paralyzed. If you care too little, you will be seen as marginal and be rejected. Identify people in your organization who you think have the right balance of conformity and innovation. How do they behave? How do they dress? What is different about them? What can you emulate and learn from them? What is your weakest aspect? What can you do to make it a strength? Are you willing to do that? What are your greatest fears? What would it take to overcome them? Again, are you willing to do that? Leadership and problems concept: what is the job of a leader? Take a minute, think about that question and note your answer. For a long time, leaders were expected to solve problems. They were thought to be better educated, better prepared, better able to figure out what needed to be done. As organizations became more complex, the problem became finding the problems. Then, the issue for leadership was, how do I find out what needs to be fixed before it becomes a big problem? Internal information systems, that is, the ones the leaders used, were critical to this effort. If the systems didn't capture or highlight issues that would become problems, however, the leaders might not know about the budding problems. When leaders identified and tried to fix problems, they often ran into a bigger problem: resistance of the organization to the intended solutions. Habits, in the aggregate as organizational culture, often resisted making changes in the way we do things. As organizations became larger and the importance of the momentum of organizational culture became better understood, Hal Levitt at Stanford and others suggested that maybe the job of leadership was to create problems. In other words, if the times are changing and the organization is not responding, perhaps leaders needed to help their organizations realize and respond to problems, creating perhaps significant emotional events, C's, as described by Maurice Massey, The People Puzzle, half a century ago. For many manager leaders, this was a disturbing thought. How can my job be to create problems for my people? How can I turn a herd of buffalo from one direction to another? Flight of the buffalo, standing at the back and shouting 1T do it. Did you think of the leader's job in terms of problem finding, solving, and creating? If so, you're not alone. Many others have the same view, even today. But do you even know what a problem is? More on this in the next chapter. Example: Mike Beer, a colleague at the Harvard Business School, once wrote, "The starting point of any effective change effort is a clearly defined business problem." If leaders and managers couldn't find and solve problems, what else would they do? Diagram source: https://hbs. edu faculty pages profile. ASPX FACID equals 60/21 source, adapted from Pathfinding by Harold Levitt, Stanford GBS, 1995 https://google.com search. Q equals images plus HAL plus Levitt and TBM equals ISCH and VED equals 2 RUKUJNIPAKIBZU RWHK 98 KHW for WCMMQ2. CSEG QIABAA and OAK equals images plus HAL plus Levitt and GS_LCP equals CGNPBWCQAZOCCAACBCUSCIEW_5QSCIEW_5QSCIEWIECAEACAEACAEAT if McJuckNJIck 3MTD2L6LWLTZ8ABAQ and Scliant equals IMG and EI equals VPORYOEHL for FX_ABERKEYBG and B equals 578 and BU equals 1366 and RLZ equals 1C1GCEB_ENUS 910 US 910 #IMGURK equals AYERPMGFHEH REIM Challenge 1. Review your description of the leadership job with the text and make some notes about the differences. What do you think a leader should do if not find and solve problems? What is your definition of a problem? Write that down. Reflect on how much of your time at work is spent on finding and solving problems. If you are in customer complaints service, this may be really simple. 8. What is a problem? Concept: if you believe that leadership has something to do with finding, solving, and creating problems, then, I guess, you should understand what a problem is. What is your definition? So, if you said something like an obstacle to what you want, consider first who is the you? That is, if you asked the CEO, the VP of HR, the SVP of Marketing, and the CFO what the problems in the company were, would they agree? Probably not. there would be variation in their answers. So the first challenge in identifying problems is to identify the key players in a situation. Can you list the stakeholders in a situation? Not 20 or 30 people, but the 5 or 6 people or groups of people who have an investment in the issue. This is an important part of seeing what needs to be done as described earlier. The second step in identifying problems is figuring out accurately what those stakeholders want. In my experience, it turns out that "what do you want?" is a very difficult question. I once taught a second-year MBA elective titled "What Do You Want?" to help graduating students figure out, before they hit the 40-year grind, what they were working for: wealth, power, fame, happy family, salvation, good health, big houses, fine cuisine, and so on. Most people struggle with that question and believe that it will change from decade. How well do 10-year habits change, I ask? If you don't know what some key players want, perhaps you should go ask them. It's a good way to build relationships, offer your help, and fill out your organizational understanding, realizing of course that A, they may not know, and B, they may not tell you the real things. Then, you can construct a simple T-account sheet for each stakeholder and list out their problems. The wants are the debit side, and you can note their gots on the credit side. If there is no gap between what one wants and what one has, then there is no problem. Only where there are want-got gaps are there problems. Yes or no? Thus, problems are want-got gaps for somebody. Problems can be big ones, little ones, false ones, red herrings. There are all kinds of problems. We want to see the big and relevant ones to the business situation we are in, yes? Example: here are a couple of simple examples. George wants to be on budget, but by the end of the third quarter, he is $20,000 behind. We could diagram it like this. Chapter 5. GOTS. To be promoted, Sandra got the job. You can see how we could easily develop these little T accounts, one for each stakeholder, and analyze their situation and how it is contributing to our current situation. This exercise requires one to see the world through other people's eyes. We have to let go of what we think they should want or what we would want and see the other person's points of view. This also enhances our ability to see what needs to be done described earlier. Finally, there is always the universal or providential or consultant's point of view. We can look at a situation and try to think what an expert with total information would want in this situation. ABC Consulting. Chapter 6. GOTS. Client: to have strong leadership. Weak leader: you can get a quick topographical map of your team's problems by using this technique, making one T-account sheet for each person. And you may need to practice the empathy needed to make an accurate display as shown in the second diagram below. Diagram Challenge 1. Make a T-account list of your problems. 2. Make a T-account list of your boss's problems. 3. Make a T-account list of your significant other's problems. 4. Make a T-account providential list of your company's problems. 5. If you are in a team or leading a team, make a list of your team member's problems as best you know them. What's missing? What do you need to learn? 10 hours 1 minute remaining. 9. The problem with problems concept. Wait a minute. There is a problem with problems. The problem with problems is that if you view your job, consciously or unconsciously, as finding and solving problems, you are living outside in. Someone else is driving your agenda. In this mode, you are in a reactive frame of mind, responding to issues that others have created. Problem response is not all bad. Clearly, we have to deal with obstacles to what we want. And some problems are potentially lethal. Being able to sort out, to see, the difference between small problems and big problems is important. But how does one make those judgments? If we make those judgments based on our elephant, our level 3 VABEs, we may be making dysfunctional decisions. But the big issue with problems is that a focus on them put us in a reactionary, outside-in frame of mind. And in that, we yield to the world around us the driving focus of our work. The other issue with problem solving is that a focus on the problem often leads to short-term results that don't attend to the deeper sources of the problem. This short-term perspective can lead to a false sense of security. Take dieting for example. The problem is we want to be lighter, deeper, feel better, so we diet. We lose a few pounds and we are hungry. We fight the feelings, and for most of us, we think, I've lost a few pounds, one piece of toast with honey, one tea matter that much. We don't notice any change, so we have another piece of toast. Or a bit of ice cream. Then we gain weight, and we are back where we started. Efforts to change have a certain negative resiliency. We tend to spring back to our former comfort zone. This oscillation, back and forth, is a characteristic of efforts to solve problems. We work on them for a while, show a little results, feel good about it, relax, and go backward. In business, I have seen oscillations as companies swing back and forth from growth versus contraction, product focus versus customer focus, internal versus acquisition growth, centralized versus decentralized, and more. Example: consider the company, let us call them Super Satellite Corporation, who built some of the world's most sophisticated satellites. Their focus on quality gave them a high-cost structure. Eventually, that cost structure eroded their profit picture. So the board hired a new CEO known for his ability to manage costs. Immediately, the new administration began to implement cost-cutting measures. These measures were draconian and even included the requirement that cross-country flights would include at least one stop in the Midwest in order to get cheaper tickets. Eventually, those cost-cutting measures cut so much fat out of the company that it couldn't function and it went bankrupt. Surely there were other reasons for that result, and the focus on solving that one problem, the high-cost structure, meant that other issues of greater importance were neglected. I know another organization that went back to its original organization after 5 years of moving to a new organization. Can you imagine the amount of energy and productivity that was lost by making those changes? Diagrams source, adapted from Robert Fritz, The Path of Least Resistance. Source, adapted from Robert Fritz, The Path of Least Resistance. Challenge 1. Identify as many oscillations as you can in your own life. Include the opposing endpoints of the oscillations. Identify as many oscillations as you can in your organization. What has been the impact on the organizational culture and energy level of those oscillations? Identify the main problems in your life. Note who created them. Identify the main problems in your organization. Who do you think created them? How much of your time do you spend each day working on problems created by others? What % of your time is devoted to these problems? Leader as creator concept. As we noted in the last chapter, the problem with a problem-oriented approach to leadership is that it is fundamentally reactive, outside in. When one takes a problem-oriented approach to leadership, one lets the outside world set one's agenda and strategy. There is some theoretic basis for this. Organizations who can adapt to changes taking place in the world around them are more likely to survive. Darwin noted that it's not the strongest organism that survives, it's the most adaptable. At the same time, depending on what problems that the world presents to you that the leader responds to, one may be doing exactly the wrong and short-sighted thing. The alternative, outlined by Robert Fritz in his book The Path of Least Resistance, is to take the point of view of artists like authors, sculptors, and painters to create. Fritz's compelling logic is that problem-solving leads to reactive oscillation, which we discussed in the last chapter. Jung argued that none of the major problems in life could ever be solved, they were only supplanted by other more important life forces. This is a powerful idea. Rather than focusing on solving problems, why not focus on creating a bigger, more powerful force? The creative force is one such force. Fritz's approach begins with an accurate assessment of the situation at the moment. This is akin to Jim Collins's Confront the Brutal Facts in Good to Great. Jack Welch proposed a similar vibe in Control Your Destiny when he wrote Accept reality as it is, not as it was nor as you wish it were. The second step in Fritz's plan is to create a vision of where you want to be. This is a key step. You cannot buy a vision. Well, you could perhaps from a consulting firm. But then you wouldn't be leading, you be the executor, the implementer, not the creator, author. Fritz's notion here is that like a composer, an artist, or a sculptor, you see in your mind what you want to do, what you want to build, and then you begin to make it happen. Actually, Fritz would say, just let it sit there. If you want it bad enough, it will grow on you and begin to shape your behavior. You will begin studying how to make it happen. You will run into obstacles, problems, but they won't be much more than speed bumps. Like the Aikido principle of leading energy beyond the point of contact, you will be extending your view beyond the immediate problems and with a direction and a focus. So, one alternative to the problem-oriented leadership approach is the creative approach. The core question here is, what do you want to create? If you can't answer that question, with regard to your own life, your current responsibilities or your organization, perhaps you're not ready yet for the leadership role. Example: what is the energy difference between organizations that want to make as much money as they can and those that seek to serve a particular customer base? Consider, for example, the goal of Google, to organize all the world's information. Truckload after truckload of books checked out of Stanford libraries being scanned into a gigantic database that will digitize as much of the world's written wisdom as possible. Here is one example of a clear desire to create something, a digital, online available library of all the world's books. Chapter 7: Creation. Reduce pollution, create a healthy living environment, increase profits, create a sustainable company, fire more people, create a flexible company, gain control, create a responsive company, raise the stock price, create lasting contribution to society, lay brick, create a cathedral, increase membership, create an attractive learning company. Diagram source: https://google.com. Search Q equals images plus Carl plus Jung and TBM equals ISCH and VED equals 2 RUKUG G75 Hybzu RVX and EAKHYJSDBIQ2. CSEG QIABAA and OAK equals images plus Carl plus Jung and GS_LCP equals CGNPQCIGCAAQCBA milligram YIB4YBGGAEAQHLCQMAZY9KMGYKCRBMGACAB4AIB TOGBQASSAQE5MAE and Sclient equals ING and EI equals CORYMBYH_G6GGEC. 2BGQAQ and B equals 578 and BU equals 1366 and RLZ equals 1C1GCEB _ENUS 910 US 910 #IMGURK equals MN9 MPBRW6 BOPMM Challenge 1. What are you trying to create in your life? What are you trying to create at work? Practice thinking every day on your way into work. What am I going to create today? 1. In Aikido, one strives to meet, Ari, or merge with the opponent's energy or force, Ki, and then lead that force in a different direction. The point of contact between opponents is often the focus in other martial arts like boxing or taekwondo. Focusing on that point can produce lots of power, and a more powerful opponent can then win. By focusing beyond the point of impact, one can often turn the opponent's force in a new direction and ultimately throw them to the ground. 2. http://voanews.com. Google plans to put all the world's books online 80 for 27622 for 16834. HTML11. Power and leadership concept. There is, I say, a difference between power and leadership. All leadership exerts power, but not all power is leadership. Power is the ability to get others to do what you want them to do. So while leadership is to varying degrees powerful, some people with lots of power are not leaders. I say that because in my view leadership consists of the ability and the willingness to influence others so that they respond voluntarily. Without a voluntary response, we cannot call it leadership. It may be the use of power, or the abuse of power, but it's not leadership. In order to understand more about power and leadership and the relation between them, let us first consider power and its sources. French and Raven, 1959, identified 5 sources of power: legitimate, coercive, reward, expertise, and referent. Legitimate power means one has the title, the legal authority to influence. Legitimate power accrues to people who hold offices like chief executive, president, director, bishop, don, or any other recognized title of leadership will have some power simply because they hold the office, regardless of their personal abilities. They may or may not be effective leaders. People who rely on their titles to influence others are not developing their leadership skills, they are simply exerting power given to their offices. The underlying assumption related to legitimate power is something like "you must do what I say because I am that fill in the box." When parents say, "do what I say because I'm your father," they are relying on legitimate power. Coercive power comes from the ability to threaten or hurt others so that they are forced to comply or, in looser terms, follow. People will do what coercive people ask because they fear them. Threatening people with bodily harm, financial harm, the loss of their jobs, harm to their families, or any other kind of harm are employing coercive power. The underlying assumption for such people is something like "I can and will hurt you unless you do what I ask." Sadly, for many people, coercive power is their primary means of influencing others. Reward power refers to influence developed from exchange. If person A offers person B something that person B wants, they have influence over them. Most for-profit enterprises operate heavily on reward power, offering employees wages to do things they otherwise might not do. Parents often use this source of power too when they offer candy, toys, trips, or money to their children when they perform in a particular way. Rewards or exchanges only have influence when the leader offers something the other person wants. Expertise power flows from a person's knowledge or skill in an area that someone else admires or wants. We listen to experts when they speak, and we listen more intently when they are experts in an area of importance to us. We may admire experts in fields unrelated to our own interests, but are not likely to model them. We are more likely to model or emulate people who are experts in areas that we value, whether it be finance, sports, music, or careers. Referent power is more ethereal. Referent power depicts the influence a person has over another who wants to be like them. While this may seem similar to expertise power, referent power has more to do with status and condition than expertise. We allow famous people or rich people or celebrity people to influence us because internally we want to be like them, to join their clubs, to go out in their circles, to bask in their presence, and in some sense feed off their beings. We may not want to do what they do or even know how they do it, expertise, power, but we do want to be included in their circles. Chapter 8. Referent. Based on your status, fame, position, and the adoration of others as suggested, power is not a necessary or sufficient condition for the emergence of leadership. Here, we distinguish power from leadership in the following ways to help shed insights into relationship between the two. Power is not leadership. The 5 sources of power as articulated above are an example of one of the 3 identifiable forms of power, power over. The other 2 forms of power refer to power to 3 and power from for respectively. Power over usually derives from an individual's position in a time and place that is regarded as superior over others, see Hollander and Offerman 1990. The basis for this form of power is also defined as the more or less enduring relationship between the leader and the led, which gives rise to the power in the first instance, e. French 1956. Power does not require goal compatibility. It only requires dependence. A leader's dependence on this form of power can lead to the undermining of relationships with followers. This form of power also takes as its starting point the notion of goal incongruence between leaders and followers, that the person with power and the person subject to it have incompatible objectives. Tjosvold, Andrews, and Struthers, 5 Group and Organizational Management, September 1, 1991. Leadership, in my view, has 3 components: ability, willingness, and a voluntary response. Leadership ability refers to the capacity for influencing others. Leaders use a variety of, a mix of, power sources to influence others. People have different skill sets and may employ at different times and in different ways and in different strength various mixes of legitimate, coercive, reward, expertise, and referential influences. The larger one's overall mix of influence skills is, the more powerful they are. That does not mean in my experience that everyone with those skills will be eager, willing, to use them. I have met many people who would make good leaders but just don't want to do it. The reasons they offer include not wanting to play God and muck around in people's lives, fear of doing the wrong thing, timid personality, and others. The president of our university once stated that he was looking for a new dean for one of our schools and had 2 candidates, one who did not want the job. It seemed obvious to him and to us that while a person might be well equipped to lead, they may or may not want to be put in a leadership position. Again, note that those in formal positions of authority have some legitimate authority but may or may not be effective overall leaders. Incumbents we can call accurately and conservatively authoritars. Whether they are or can develop into leaders is an open question. In leadership, rights are voluntarily conferred. This implies that leaders must be able to elicit voluntary response in others. As such, if a person has the skill set and the willingness to apply that skill set, the final element of real leadership is whether or not the intended followers choose to follow. Without that choice, how can we say the person is in fact leading as opposed to dictating? Are dictators leaders? Looking through historical and power lenses, perhaps. In the modern world, in my view, unless there is a voluntary response, you cannot call it leadership. Challenge is 1. How do people exert power over you? How do you exert power over others? Whom and how? Which of the sources of power do you respect and admire the most? Write down your list of favorite leaders, current and historical. What kinds of power did they use? What kinds of power did your parents use on you? How has that affected your own influence style? 3. Power to suggests the empowerment of followers or the sharing of power with followers. For power from is the ability to resist the power of others by effectively fending off their unwanted demands. It can also be seen as having the ability to protect oneself. 5. Power and interdependence in work groups, views of managers and employees. 11. Power and leadership concept. There is, I say, a difference between power and leadership. All leadership exerts power, but not all power is leadership. Power is the ability to get others to do what you want them to do. So while leadership is to varying degrees powerful, some people with lots of power are not leaders. I say that because in my view leadership consists of the ability and the willingness to influence others so that they respond voluntarily. Without a voluntary response, we cannot call it leadership. It may be the use of power, or the abuse of power, but it's not leadership. In order to understand more about power and leadership and the relation between them, let us first consider power and its sources. French and Raven, 1959, identified 5 sources of power: legitimate, coercive, reward, expertise, and referent. Legitimate power means one has the title, the legal authority to influence. Legitimate power accrues to people who hold offices like chief executive, president, director, bishop, don, or any other recognized title of leadership will have some power simply because they hold the office, regardless of their personal abilities. They may or may not be effective leaders. People who rely on their titles to influence others are not developing their leadership skills, they are simply exerting power given to their offices. The underlying assumption related to legitimate power is something like "you must do what I say because I am that fill in the box." When parents say, "do what I say because I'm your father," they are relying on legitimate power. Coercive power comes from the ability to threaten or hurt others so that they are forced to comply or, in looser terms, follow. People will do what coercive people ask because they fear them. Threatening people with bodily harm, financial harm, the loss of their jobs, harm to their families or any other kind of harm are employing coercive power. The underlying assumption for such people is something like "I can and will hurt you unless you do what I ask." Sadly, for many people, coercive power is their primary means of influencing others. Reward power refers to influence developed from exchange. If person A offers person B something that person B wants, they have influence over them. Most for-profit enterprises operate heavily on reward power, offering employees wages to do things they otherwise might not do. Parents often use this source of power too when they offer candy, toys, trips, or money to their children when they perform in a particular way. Rewards or exchanges only have influence when the leader offers something the other person wants. Expertise power flows from a person's knowledge or skill in an area that someone else admires or wants. We listen to experts when they speak, and we listen more intently when they are experts in an area of importance to us. We may admire experts in fields unrelated to our own interests, but are not likely to model them. We are more likely to model or emulate people who are experts in areas that we value, whether it be finance, sports, music, or careers. Referent power is more ethereal. Referent power depicts the influence a person has over another who wants to be like them. While this may seem similar to expertise power, referent power has more to do with status and condition than expertise. We allow famous people or rich people or celebrity people to influence us because internally we want to be like them, to join their clubs, to go out in their circles, to bask in their presence, and in some sense feed off their beings. We may not want to do what they do or even know how they do it, expertise power, but we do want to be included in their circles. Chapter 9, Referent. Based on your status, fame, position, and the adoration of others as suggested, power is not a necessary or sufficient condition for the emergence of leadership. Here, we distinguish power from leadership in the following ways to help shed insights into relationship between the two. Power is not leadership. The 5 sources of power as articulated above are an example of one of the 3 identifiable forms of power, power over. The other 2 forms of power refer to power to 3 and power from for respectively. Power over usually derives from an individual's position in a time and place that is regarded as superior over others, see Hollander and Offerman 1990. The basis for this form of power is also defined as the more or less enduring relationship between the leader and the led, which gives rise to the power in the first instance, e. French 1956. Power does not require goal compatibility. It only requires dependence. A leader's dependence on this form of power can lead to the undermining of relationships with followers. This form of power also takes as its starting point the notion of goal incongruence between leaders and followers, that the person with power and the person subject to it have incompatible objectives. Tjosvold, Andrews, and Struthers, 5 Group and Organizational Management, September 1, 1991. Leadership, in my view, has 3 components: ability, willingness, and a voluntary response. Leadership ability refers to the capacity for influencing others. Leaders use a variety of, a mix of, power sources to influence others. People have different skill sets and may employ at different times and in different ways and in different strengths various mixes of legitimate, coercive, reward, expertise, and referential influences. The larger one's overall mix of influence skills is, the more powerful they are. That does not mean in my experience that everyone with those skills will be eager, willing, to use them. I have met many people who would make good leaders but just don't want to do it. The reasons they offer include not wanting to play God and muck around in people's lives, fear of doing the wrong thing, timid personality, and others. The president of our university once stated that he was looking for a new dean for one of our schools and had 2 candidates, one who did not want the job. It seemed obvious to him and to us that while a person might be well-equipped, that is the heart of fundamentals of Level 3 leadership. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do people and power connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.